Why do smart people stay poor?
They don't do the things that makes people rich. And I think they probably convince themselves that they're smarter than they are. And so if you were smart, then you would be rich. And so then it follows that there's probably a series of traits of behavior that you don't do, either because you think you're above them, or you don't know about them. So either it's a declarative knowledge deficit, meaning you don't know about the thing, which has nothing to do with the intelligence. Like if somebody eats a banana, and they're from a different country and they just eat it through the skin, it doesn't mean that they're stupid. It means they're ignorant, which is very different. That's a declarative deficit. Then there's procedural deficits, which is knowing how to. And I think one of the big difficulties with smart people is they have tremendous amounts of declarative knowledge and very little procedural knowledge. And so it's like saying you read a book on how to do a private equity deal and you know everything that has to happen, but you've never done a private equity deal. It's probably unlikely that you know how to do a private equity deal. And so delineating those things has been helpful for me. And since the procedural knowledge has significantly more utility on a daily basis from a money-making perspective, I have reduced, or at least this is me transitioning to me, but like I have reduced the amount of time that I spend on declarative knowledge. And I try to get to the procedural part of it as fast as I possibly can, because I know that I'll learn significantly more by failing and doing it than, reading 100 books on sales versus doing 100 phone calls. Like you'll learn a lot more in the first 100 calls.
Yeah, it's interesting. This to me is, I'm always trying to get entrepreneurs to, one, think from first principles, which most people don't even know what that means. Sure. So you start by defining it. But this feels like that, getting to understand the essence of what it is so that you understand it the way that somebody understands a combustion engine. Sure. So you can get in and be like, well, I know what has to happen for this car to go. And if I know what has to happen, you can break it, can pull it apart, and I'll be able to put it back together because I actually understand how this works. So how does wealth creation work?
You have to have a mechanism for letting people know about your stuff. And so that can happen on a variety of channels. That typically happens either one-on-one or one-to-many. And so one-on-one would be you knock on doors, you reach out to people via DM, you send emails, you send direct mail, you make phone calls, you send text messages. Any of those are one-on-one. Outreach is one way of letting people know. You could do one-to-many to people who already know who you are, which is basically today's equivalent of a billboard, which is social media. You make posts, you make content. The third way would be that you run paid advertisements. So on those same platforms, you just pay to get the exposure rather than doing it by earning it through quality content. And then the kind of like the door four would be using those three methods to then get someone who already has the type of person that you want to advertise to, and structuring some sort of deal with them. But you'd still need to reach out to them one-on-one. You'd have to make content to attract them, or you'd have to run an ad to get to that person. So these are the core things that someone must do to promote whatever they have. Because if we think about it from what must occur in order for a transaction to happen, well, people have to know that you exist or that your product exists. No one can buy something without knowing it exists. And so we have to start with promotion. The second component is that they have some sort of voluntary exchange. And so that means you have goods and services that are exchanged for money. And so I think the idea of like money being created really only happens with the government, but for everybody else, we exchange for it. And so there are people all around us. Like one of my really fun exercises is looking at whatever room you're in and knowing that everything that was there's a business behind it. So like the walls you have, there's the person who manufactured the raw materials, there's the person who sourced the materials, there's the labor that went to installing it, there was an architect who designed it, and then you look at this mic and you're like, okay, well there's this foam thing which he probably got from a third party, then there's the mechanisms inside, which is another business, there's the distributor that you bought this from. Like there's all these pieces. When people are like, man, I don't know what opportunities there are. I'm like, you can literally open your eyes and everything that you see has a business behind it. And so from the value component, for people who are, I'll just tie this into people who are starting out, I recommend most people start with services because it requires no capital and you require time. And when you start out, you use what you have. And so if you have no money and you only have time, then you trade the time for money. And so either you're going to do something that other people don't want to do that they know how to do. So like taking someone's trash out, doing lawn care, washing things, like cleaning. Those are all things that people know how to do but don't want. Then the second level of that is doing things that people don't want to do or know how to do. And obviously that's knowledge work, which you get. The amount that you can get paid is predicated on the value that whatever that skill deficiency is to the other person. And so I think about it like that. The person has to know you exist, so you have to do one of those advertising activities I referenced. And then the thing that you give them is you're going to give them some amount of time back, either the time to learn the skill or the time to do the skill. And then once that exchange is made, then both people say thank you because they didn't want to do the work and you wanted the money. And